It all started in that courtroom, a room buzzing with whispers and disbelief. The wooden benches creaked with the weight of spectators, all eyes fixed on the unfolding drama that had become my life. Brooke, my wife of 15 years, sat beside Travis, her lover, both of them wearing smirks that only betrayal could grant. The confidence in their postures spoke volumes. They thought they had won. Before the gavel even struck, I remember the weight of the manila folder in my hands, how my palms sweated against the paper. For months, I had carried the burden of their deception, watching as they plotted behind half-closed doors, speaking in hushed tones they thought I couldn't hear. Their plan had been simple, or so they thought: trick me into signing away my land, the property my family had worked for generations to protect. "You won't even notice," Brooke had said one evening, her voice dripping with mockery. "It's just a formality, Luke. Just sign the papers." She'd laughed then, a sound that once brought me joy, but now cut like shards of glass. Travis had joined in, his hand casually resting on her shoulder, as if he belonged there, as if my presence in my own home was the intrusion. The land they wanted stretched across 200 acres of Fairmont's richest soil, passed down through 4 generations of my family. My great-grandfather had worked those fields until his hands bled. My grandfather had expanded them through the Depression, and my father had taught me every inch of that property before cancer took him too soon. The strength of a man is measured not by what he keeps, he used to say, but by what he protects. In the courtroom, Judge Morales adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents before him. The ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, doing little to dispel the tension thick in the air. Brooke whispered something to Travis, and they both snickered, stealing glances my way. They expected me to crumble, to accept defeat with the same silence I had maintained throughout their mockery. I had stayed quiet all through their taunts, letting them believe they had won, letting them think that my silence was surrender, that my patience was weakness. Little did they know that my silence was deliberate, a shield behind which I had been preparing. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Morales called, his voice resonant in the now silent courtroom, "do you have anything to add before I make my ruling?" I felt a surge of calm and determination I hadn't known I still possessed. Rising from my seat, I approached the bench, aware of Brooke's eyes following me, no doubt expecting some pathetic plea or emotional outburst. "Yes, Your Honor." My voice came out stronger than I had expected. "I'd like to submit this into evidence." I handed over the notarized contract that Lauren Jacobs, my lawyer, had prepared in secret, a legal shield I had quietly forged while they plotted. Lauren stood then, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the shocked expressions now forming on Brooke and Travis's faces. "Your Honor," Lauren said, "my client anticipated this fraudulent attempt to seize his property. The document before you is a legally binding trust, created 3 months ago, securing Mr. Harrison's land and explicitly forbidding any transfer without specific notarized consent that was never given." Judge Morales reviewed the papers, his expression unchanging, but his eyes sharp with understanding. The courtroom remained silent, the air electric with anticipation. I glanced at Brooke, watching as her confident smirk began to falter. "These documents appear to be in order," Judge Morales finally stated. He looked directly at Brooke, his gaze unyielding. "Ma'am," he said, voice clear and authoritative, "you are trespassing, not just on Mr. Harrison's land, but on his trust and the legal boundaries this court upholds." The gallery erupted in whispers. Brooke's confident smirk vanished completely, replaced by shock that rendered her utterly speechless. Travis's face drained of color, his hand gripping the table edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. And in that moment, standing in the center of a courtroom I had dreaded entering, I realized something far more profound than victory over deceit. I had reclaimed my dignity, my peace, and the legacy of my family. "Furthermore," Judge Morales continued, silencing the murmurs, "with a raised hand, I'm issuing an immediate injunction against Mrs. Harrison and Mr. Campbell, prohibiting them from accessing the property in question pending final resolution." The rest of the hearing passed in a blur of legal terms and procedural details. I remember Brooke attempting to speak, her voice cracking as she tried to form some defense, some explanation that could undo what had just happened. But the damage was done. The truth had emerged, not with a vengeful roar, but with the quiet authority of preparation and patience. As we left the courtroom, Lauren touched my arm gently. "You did well, Luke," she said, her eyes reflecting a professional pride mixed with personal concern. "But this is just the beginning. Are you ready for what comes next?" I looked back at Brooke, now huddled with her attorney, her perfectly styled hair falling across her face as she gestured frantically. Travis stood slightly apart, already creating distance between them, rats deserting a sinking ship. "Yes," I answered, surprised by the certainty in my voice. "I've been ready since the day I found out. The day I discovered their betrayal came rushing back to me, a rainy Tuesday when I'd returned home early from a business trip. The sound of their laughter had drawn me to the study, where I found them hunched over our financial documents, discussing how they would develop my family's land once it was taken care of. I had backed away silently, not confronting them then. Instead, I had called Lauren the next morning, an old friend from college who had become one of the most respected attorneys in Fairmont. Walking down the courthouse steps, I felt the weight of months of deception lifting. The air seemed clearer somehow, the late autumn sun breaking through clouds that had threatened rain all morning. My truck waited in the parking lot, mud-spattered and reliable, much like the life I had built before Brooke decided it wasn't enough. I had loved her once, deeply and completely. We'd met at a community fundraiser, her vibrant laugh catching my attention from across the room. She was from the city, visiting relatives, and had found our small town charmingly authentic. I had found her fascinating, with her quick wit and ambitious dreams. When she agreed to settle in Fairmont, I believed it was because she loved me enough to adapt. Now I wondered if she had ever seen anything beyond the value of what I owned. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Kate. How did it go? I hadn't told many people about today's hearing, just Kate, who had never trusted Brooke, and my oldest friend Michael, who had offered his guest house if things went south. "I still have the land," I texted back. "I'll call you tonight." What I didn't add was that I still had myself too, the part of me that Brooke's betrayal had nearly destroyed, the part that believed in honor and commitment, that trusted in the goodness of others. It was bruised and wary now, but still intact, and in many ways, that was the greater victory. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the driveway of what had once been our home. The two-story farmhouse stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, windows dark except for the porch light I'd left on that morning. It looked different now, emptier, as if the betrayal that had occurred inside had hollowed out its very essence. I sat in my truck for a long moment, gathering the strength to walk inside. The court victory felt distant now, replaced by the heavy reality of what came next. Divorce papers, property settlements, the dismantling of a life I had believed would last forever. My phone buzzed again, Michael this time. "Guest house is ready if you need it." "Beer's cold." I smiled despite myself. Michael Jenkins had been my friend since third grade, when he'd punched Tommy Williams for making fun of my second-hand clothes. We'd been inseparable through school, and even after he'd left for college and I'd stayed to work the land, our friendship had remained unshakable. He'd never said "I told you so" about Brooke, even though he'd had his reservations from the start. "Thanks," I texted back. "Might take you up on that tomorrow. Need one night here first." The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside. Brooke had moved most of her things out weeks ago after I'd confronted her with what I knew. She'd tried denial at first, then anger, and finally a cold calculation that revealed just how little she had ever cared. "You really think anyone will believe you?" she'd said, her beautiful face twisted with contempt. Poor, simple Luke, so focused on his precious dirt that he couldn't keep his wife interested. "Everyone will think you drove me to it." I hadn't responded then. What was there to say to someone who could reduce 15 years to such a cruel dismissal? In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator, finding it nearly empty except for some beer, condiments, and a container of pasta salad Kate had dropped off days ago. I wasn't hungry anyway. Instead, I grabbed a beer and walked through the house, taking inventory of what remained and what was gone. Our bedroom, my bedroom now, still held the furniture we'd bought together, but Brooke's presence had been methodically removed. No bottles of perfume on the dresser, no silk robes hanging from the bathroom door. The closet door stood open, her side a row of empty hangers that swayed slightly in the draft from the heating vent. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hand over the quilt my mother had made as a wedding gift. She hadn't lived to see what became of that marriage, a blessing perhaps. She had always believed in Brooke, had welcomed her as the daughter she'd never had. "She's a spark, that one," Mom had said once, her voice already weakened by the cancer that would take her 6 months later. "She'll keep you from getting too settled in your ways, Luke." A spark indeed, one that had nearly burned down everything I valued. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Kate's name flashed on the screen. "So, are you going to tell me what happened, or do I have to drive over there?" she demanded without preamble. "Hello to you too," I said, unable to keep the weariness from my voice. "Don't hello me, I've been waiting all day. Did the judge see through their scheme? Did Lauren destroy them? I need details, Luke." I found myself smiling at her fierce protectiveness. Kate was 5 years younger than me, with our father's stubborn chin and our mother's compassionate heart. She'd never made a secret of her dislike for Brooke, though she'd tried, mostly unsuccessfully, to hide it for my sake. "The judge ruled in my favor," I told her. "The land stays with me. Brooke and Travis are legally barred from the property." "Ha!" Kate's triumph echoed through the phone. I wish I could have seen her face. Was she wearing that stupid designer jacket? The one she bought when you were worrying about the tractor repairs? "Kate," I said, a note of warning in my voice. Despite everything, I couldn't find satisfaction in Brooke's humiliation. The pain was still too fresh, the memories of happier times still too vivid. She sighed. I know, you're too decent for your own good. But Luke, you have to admit there's some justice in this. After everything she did." "There is," I conceded, "but it doesn't feel like I thought it would." A silence stretched between us, filled with understanding. Kate had been through her own heartbreak 3 years ago, when her fiancé had left her for a job opportunity in Chicago. She knew that victory often came with its own kind of emptiness. "Want me to come over?" she finally asked. "I could bring actual food. You're probably staring into an empty fridge right now." I laughed softly. "Am I that predictable?" "Only to those who love you," she said, her voice gentler now. "Seriously, I can be there in 20 minutes. I considered her offer, tempted by the promise of company to ward off the loneliness pressing in around me. But something in me needed this solitude, needed to face the ghost of my marriage in this empty house. "Not tonight," I said. "I need to sort through some things. Rain check for tomorrow?" "Fine," she agreed reluctantly. "But I'm calling in the morning, and if you don't answer, I'm coming over with reinforcements." After we hung up, I wandered into the study, the same room where I had discovered Brooke and Travis plotting. It was strange how a space could be tainted by a single moment, how the warm oak bookshelves and comfortable leather chair that had once been my refuge now felt like a crime scene. On the desk lay the financial papers I had been reviewing since learning of their plan: bank statements, property taxes, investment accounts, the careful organization of a life being dismantled and rebuilt. Lauren had helped me secure my assets, creating the trust that had saved my land, but there was still much to untangle. I sat at the desk opening my laptop. The wallpaper was still a photo of Brooke and me from our 10th anniversary trip to Maine, her golden hair blowing in the sea, breeze, her smile radiant, my arm around her waist. I stared at it for a long moment before changing it to the default blue background. Another small death in a season of endings. An email notification popped up, from Travis Campbell. My jaw tightened as I clicked it open. "Luke," it read, "today was a misunderstanding. I was only trying to help Brooke secure her future. We should talk man to man. Meet me at Donnelly's tomorrow, 7 p.m. The audacity was almost impressive. I deleted the email without responding, then shut the laptop with more force than necessary. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows with increasing intensity. The sound had always been soothing to me, a farmer's son who knew the value of each drop. Tonight, it matched my mood, a cleansing deluge. Washing away what could not be salvaged, I moved to the living room window, watching lightning illuminate the distant fields, my fields, still mine despite their scheming. In the flash of light, I could see the oak tree my great-grandfather had planted, its massive branches swaying in the wind. It had weathered countless storms just as I would weather this one. Morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only follows a storm. I woke before dawn, a habit ingrained from years of farm work, though there were no crops to tend now, just decisions to make and wounds to heal. The house felt different in the pale light, less haunted by yesterday's ghosts. I made coffee and carried it to the front porch, settling into the old rocking chair that had been my father's favorite spot. The air was crisp with autumn, the field stretching before me in a patchwork of browns and fading greens. This view had sustained generations of Harrisons. It would sustain me still. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. Meeting at 10 to discuss next steps. My office. The reality of divorce proceedings loomed large, papers to file, assets to divide. Though the land was secure, there would be battles over the house, our investments, even the furniture that filled these rooms. Brooke had never understood why this place mattered so much to me. To her, land was just another asset, something to leverage or trade. You could sell just a portion, she'd argued countless times. We could travel, see the world. There's more to life than this small town. Perhaps she'd been right about that last part. Fairmont, with its population of just under 12,000, wasn't for everyone, but it was home. My roots ran as deep as the old oak trees. As the sun climbed higher, I showered and dressed, choosing clothes with unusual care. The charcoal suit I'd worn to court yesterday was replaced by dark jeans and a crisp blue button-down, professional enough for a lawyer's office, but still authentically me. Brooke had always pushed me toward designer labels, claiming I needed to look the part of a successful landowner. Today, I dressed for myself. Main Street was bustling with the usual Thursday morning activity as I parked outside Lauren's office. Fairmont Hardware displayed full gardening supplies, and Margie's Bakery had a line stretching to the door. Normal life continuing despite the upheaval of mine. Inside the small brick building that housed Jacob's legal services, the receptionist, Emily according to her nameplate, greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "Ms. Jacobs is expecting you, Mr. Harrison. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, though the kindness in her eyes nearly undid my careful composure. It was the first hint that news of yesterday's court victory had already spread through town. Lauren's office was a reflection of her personality, organized, unpretentious, with bookshelves filled with legal volumes and framed diplomas sharing wall space with her children's artwork. She rose from behind her desk as I entered, her practical pantsuit a far cry from the power dressing of big city attorneys Brooke had wanted me to hire. "Luke," she said warmly, extending her hand. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I answered truthfully, "though I haven't run into either of them yet." She gestured for me to sit. "You might not. Word is Travis left town last night, headed back to Chicago according to Michael's wife who works at the hotel. This news shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. That was fast. Men like Travis don't stick around when things get difficult," Lauren said, a hint of disgust in her voice. "Brooke's been calling my office all morning. I haven't taken her calls. What does she want?" "To negotiate, I assume. Her attorney, that shark from Springfield, also reached out." Lauren opened a folder on her desk. "But we're in a strong position now. The judge's ruling on the land trust gives us leverage for everything else." For the next hour we discussed strategy, what I was entitled to, what I was willing to concede, how to proceed with minimal conflict. Throughout our conversation, I found myself struggling to maintain the anger that had fueled me through the court case. In its place was something more complex, a mixture of grief for what I'd lost and relief that the deception was over. "You're being very generous," Lauren observed when I suggested Brooke could keep her car and the vacation timeshare we rarely used. "More than many would be in your position." I shrugged. "I just want this over with. Fighting over every fork and spoon won't bring back what matters." She studied me with the shrewd gaze that had made her one of the best attorneys in the county. "And what matters to you now?" "Luke?" The question caught me off guard. For so long my focus had been on saving the land, on countering Brooke and Travis's scheme. I hadn't thought much beyond that immediate battle. "Peace," I finally said. "The chance to rebuild without looking over my shoulder." Lauren nodded, making a note in her file. "We can get you that. It'll take time, but we'll get there." When our meeting ended, I wasn't ready to return to the empty house. Instead, I walked to Margie's Bakery, needing the comfort of familiar faces and the normalcy of a place untouched by my personal drama. The bell jingled as I entered, and several heads turned. Conversations paused briefly before resuming with slightly forced casualness. News traveled fast in small towns, and by now most of Fairmont would know about the court hearing. Margie herself was behind the counter, her round face flushed from the heat of the ovens. She'd been my mother's closest friend, and her cinnamon rolls had been a Saturday tradition in our family for as long as I could remember. "Luke Harrison," she said, her voice carrying over the murmur of customers. About time you showed up. I've got something special for you today." Before I could respond, she was filling a box with an assortment of pastries, waving away my attempt to pay. "On the house, doctor's orders. Sugar helps heal a broken heart." "I'm not sure that's medically sound advice," I said, managing a small smile. "Then consider it prescription-strength comfort food." She leaned across the counter, lowering her voice. "I'm proud of you, Luke. Your parents would be, too." A lump formed in my throat. "Thank you, Margie." As I turned to leave, I nearly collided with Sarah Mitchell, the elementary school principal and Kate's best friend. She steadied herself, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her cup. "Luke, I'm so sorry, I wasn't watching where I was going." "Neither was I admitted. "No harm done." Sarah studied me with the same thoughtful attention she gave to students in her office. "I heard about yesterday. Kate mentioned you might need some space, but, well, if you need anything, even just someone to talk to, please call." The offer seemed sincere, her green eyes warm with concern. I'd known Sarah for years. She'd moved to Fairmont around the same time Brooke had, taking over as principal after old Mr. Davis retired. Unlike Brooke, she'd embraced small-town life, becoming an integral part of the community. "I appreciate that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Outside the bakery, the October sun had warmed the air, taking the edge off the morning chill. I walked back to my truck slowly, nodding to familiar faces, accepting brief condolences and supportive comments with as much grace as I could muster. By the time I reached the vehicle, the weight of public scrutiny felt almost as heavy as my private pain. My phone rang as I slid into the driver's seat, an unfamiliar number with a Chicago area code. I hesitated, then answered. "Luke Harrison." "Luke." Travis's voice smooth as ever. "I was hoping we could talk." I sat in silence, the box of pastries on the passenger seat beside me, watching as Mrs. Donovan walked her ancient beagle past the hardware store. "I know you're there," Travis continued. "Look, what happened was business, not personal. Brooke and I had a plan, but it fell through. These things happen. No reason we can't be civil." "Business," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Is that what you call sleeping with my wife and trying to steal my property?" He sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "I'm trying to make things right here. I've got investors interested in developing that land, turning it into something profitable. I can still cut you in. 30%, no questions asked." The audacity stunned me into momentary silence. Then something unexpected happened. I laughed, a genuine laugh that released some of the tension I'd been carrying for months. "Goodbye, Travis," I said, and ended the call. As I drove home, Margie's pastries filling the truck with the scent of cinnamon and sugar, I realized that the laugh had been the first real one in longer than I could remember. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small crack in the wall of pain letting in a sliver of light. The weekend stretched before me like uncharted territory. For 15 years, my Saturdays had followed a predictable pattern. Early morning work on the property, then errands with Brooke, often culminating in dinner with friends or a quiet evening at home. Now, those familiar rhythms were gone, leaving an emptiness that felt both terrifying and strangely liberating. I woke at dawn again, lying in bed as light gradually filled the room. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant call of birds in the fields. I had nowhere to be, no one to answer to. The day was entirely mine to shape. After coffee, I walked the property, following paths worn by generations of Harrisons. The morning dew soaked my boots as I passed the old barn, now used mostly for storage, and continued to the fishing pond my grandfather had dug during a particularly dry summer in the 50s. It was peaceful there, the water reflecting the cloudless sky above. I sat on the weathered bench near the water's edge, remembering countless afternoons spent here with my father, fishing lines cast, comfortable silence between us. It was here he'd taught me patience, the value of quiet observation, lessons that had served me well throughout my life. "The land speaks to those who listen," he'd told me once. "Most folks are too busy talking to hear it." I wondered what he would say about everything that had happened, about Brooke's betrayal, the court case, the uncertain future that lay ahead. He'd never been one for dispensing easy advice, preferring to let people find their own answers, but his steady presence had always made problems seem more manageable. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Kate. "Breakfast at my place, non-negotiable, be here in 30. I smiled, knowing resistance was futile. My sister's fierce protectiveness had only intensified since the separation began. I texted back a simple "on my way" and headed back to the house to shower and change. Kate lived on the other side of town, in a cozy bungalow she'd renovated herself. As I pulled into her driveway, the front door swung open before I could even knock, revealing my sister in an oversized sweater and jeans, her dark hair piled messily on top of her head. "You're late," she declared, though a quick glance at my watch confirmed I was actually 5 minutes early. "Good morning to you too," I replied, stepping inside to the welcoming smell of bacon and coffee. Her small kitchen was warm and bright, with yellow curtains and plants crowding every windowsill. The table was already set for two, loaded with enough food for twice as many people: pancakes, bacon, eggs, fresh fruit, and what looked suspiciously like Margie's cinnamon rolls. "Did you rob a breakfast buffet?" I asked, hanging my jacket on the back of a chair. Kate rolled her eyes. "You haven't been eating properly, I can tell." Rather than argue, I filled a plate and dug in, suddenly aware of how hungry I was. For a while we ate in companionable silence, the kind only siblings can share. "So," Kate finally said, refilling my coffee cup, "what's the plan?" "For breakfast? I think I'm doing pretty well so far." She kicked me lightly under the table. "Don't be dense. For your life, what happens next?" It was the same question Lauren had asked, and I still didn't have a clear answer. "I'm working on it. The divorce will take time. Lauren thinks we can settle without going back to court, but it depends on Brooke." Kate snorted. "Good luck with that. She's not exactly known for being reasonable. People can surprise you," I said, thinking of the unexpected laugh in my truck yesterday. Sometimes even I surprise myself. My sister studied me with the same intent gaze she'd had since childhood, when she could always tell if I was hiding a scraped knee or a bad grade. "You're different," she declared. "There's something, I don't know, lighter about you." "I slept well," I deflected, though her observation resonated with my own feelings. The crushing weight that had accompanied me for months had shifted somehow, becoming more manageable. "It's more than that," Kate persisted. "Yesterday in court, it changed something, didn't it?" I considered her question, searching for the right words. "It wasn't just winning," I said slowly. "It was standing up for myself, not letting them define who I am or what matters to me." Kate reached across the table, squeezing my hand briefly. "About damn time." After breakfast, she insisted on showing me the progress on her latest home improvement project, a built-in bookcase she was constructing in the living room. Kate had always been good with her hands, inheriting our father's skill with tools and his methodical approach to problems. As she detailed her plans for crown molding and hidden lighting, I found myself genuinely interested, engaged in the moment rather than dwelling on past hurts. "I could use some help with the installation next weekend," she mentioned casually. "If you're free." "I'll be here," I promised. "Just tell me what time." As I was leaving, Kate handed me a container of leftovers and an envelope. "Almost forgot. Sarah asked me to give you this. Said she found it at the school." The envelope was plain white, my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a faded photograph I recognized immediately. My high school baseball team after winning the state championship. I stood in the center, holding the trophy, grinning widely in the exuberance of youth. "Where did she find this?" I asked, puzzled. Kate shrugged. "She's been organizing the school archives for some anniversary thing. Said she thought you might want it." I slipped the photo back into the envelope, oddly touched by the gesture. "I'll have to thank her." My sister gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. "You should, maybe in person." Before I could respond to her obvious hint, my phone rang. The screen displayed unknown caller, but somehow I knew who it was. "Aren't you going to answer?" "That?" Kate asked. I shook my head, letting it go to voicemail. "It's Brooke. She's been calling since yesterday." "What does she want?" "I don't know," I admitted. "And right now, I don't care." Kate's eyebrows shot up in surprise. This was new, me refusing to jump at Brooke's call. For years, I had been the dutiful husband, always available, always accommodating. Not anymore. "Well, look at you," she said with approval. "Standing your ground." As I drove home, I considered calling Brooke back. There were practical matters to discuss: her remaining belongings at the house, the joint accounts Lauren had advised me to close, the countless details of unraveling a shared life. But each time I reached for the phone, something stopped me. I wasn't ready for her voice. for the manipulations I knew would follow. Instead, I found myself turning toward town again, toward the small park near the elementary school where weekend youth soccer games would be underway. I had no children playing, no reason to attend, but the normality of it appealed to me. Families cheering from the sidelines, children running with uncomplicated joy, life continuing in its simplest, purest form. I parked and walked to the field, standing at a distance as I watched a game between teams of 8-year-olds, their oversized jerseys flapping as they chased the ball with more enthusiasm than skill. Parents called encouragement, coaches offered guidance, and for a while I lost myself in the simple pleasure of community, the very thing Brooke had always found so stifling. "They're awful, aren't they?" a voice beside me said, startling me from my thoughts. Sarah Mitchell stood there, a travel mug in one hand, smiling at the chaotic game before us. "But they're having the time of their lives." "The best kind of awful," I agreed, returning her smile. "Thanks for the photo, by the way. Kate just gave it to me." Sarah nodded, her attention still on the field. "I thought you might like a reminder of happier times. Though I hope there are plenty more ahead for you." Something in her voice, its sincerity perhaps or the complete lack of pity, touched me deeply. "I'd like to believe that." She turned then, meeting my gaze directly. "You should. Endings are just beginnings in disguise, Luke, even the painful ones." Monday morning arrived with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. The weekend had been a strange mix of solitude and unexpected connection. Quiet hours at home punctuated by Kate's determined cheerfulness and that brief, oddly meaningful conversation with Sarah at the soccer field. I woke feeling more settled in my skin, more certain of the path forward, however undefined it might still be. Over coffee, I opened my laptop to check emails. Among the usual notifications and newsletters was a message from Brooke, sent late last night. "We need to talk. In person. There are things you don't understand." I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar pull of obligation, the need to respond, to fix, to smooth things over. It had been the pattern of our marriage, Brooke creating waves, me calming the waters, but the court hearing had changed something fundamental between us. The scales had shifted. I closed the laptop without replying and instead called Michael. "Is that offer for the guest house still open?" "Always," he answered immediately. "Something happen?" "Not yet," I said, "but I need a change of scene. Just for a few days. Keys under the flower pot. Mi casa es su casa, brother." The decision to temporarily leave the farmhouse felt both necessary and symbolic. I needed distance from the spaces where memories of Brooke lingered, where every room contained some echo of our life together. More importantly, I needed to reclaim my ability to choose, to act, rather than simply react to the chaos she had created. I packed a bag with essentials, locked the house, and drove the familiar route to Michael's property on the outskirts of town. His sprawling ranch house sat on 10 acres of well-tended land, with the guest house, a converted barn, situated at the edge of a small apple orchard. It was rustic but comfortable, a perfect retreat. As promised, the key waited beneath a ceramic flower pot shaped like a frog. Inside, the space was clean and welcoming, with exposed beams, a stone fireplace and large windows overlooking the orchard. Michael had left a note on the kitchen counter beside a 6-pack of beer. "Fridge is stocked, Wi-Fi password is Sanctuary Town 234. Call if you need anything, or don't call and just come to the main house. Either way." I smiled at his casual thoughtfulness. Michael had been married to Diane for 12 years, and their relationship had always seemed effortless compared to mine with Brooke. They moved through life as partners, neither dominating the other, both contributing their strengths. I had envied them without recognizing what was missing in my own marriage. After unpacking, I called Lauren to update her on my temporary relocation. "Smart move," she approved. I was going to suggest something similar. Brooke's attorney reached out again this morning. They're pushing for mediation, rather than continuing through the courts. What do you think? I think they realized how badly they miscalculated. The judge's ruling on the land put us in a strong position. Mediation could be faster and less expensive, but only if Brooke is genuinely willing to be reasonable. I considered this, looking out at the apple trees heavy with fruit. Set it up, I decided. But not this week. I need some time. Take all the time. You need, Luke. This is a marathon, not a sprint. After we hung up, I walked through the orchard, picking an apple and polishing it against my shirt before taking a bite. The tartness was refreshing, a clean taste that cleared my head. In the distance, I could see Michael's house, smoke rising from the chimney despite the mild weather. Diane loved a fire regardless of season, claiming it made any house feel more like home. My phone buzzed with a text, Kate checking in. I assured her I was fine, just taking some space at Michael's. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. Perfect. I'm bringing dinner tonight, 7 p.m. No arguments. I started to type a protest, then deleted it. Maybe company was exactly what I needed. The rest of the day passed in a kind of peaceful productivity. I answered work emails, consulted with the property manager, who oversaw the leased portions of my land, and finally called my accountant to discuss financial implications of the divorce. By late afternoon, I felt more in control than I had in weeks. Around 6, I heard a car crunching up the gravel drive, too early for Kate. Through the window, I saw Sarah Mitchell's practical blue sedan parking beside my truck. She stepped out carrying what appeared to be a basket, hesitating a moment before approaching the door. I opened it before she could knock. Sarah, this is unexpected. She looked momentarily flustered. I hope I'm not intruding. Kate mentioned you were staying here and I was dropping off some books at Michael and Diane's. She held out the basket. Diane sent these. Apple muffins from the Orchard Harvest. Thank you, I said, taking the basket. Would you like to come in? I can make coffee. Oh, I don't want to impose. You're not, I assured her, stepping back to make room. I could use the company. She entered somewhat tentatively, taking in the rustic interior with appreciative eyes. This is lovely. I've never been inside the guest house before. Michael converted it himself about 5 years ago, I explained, moving to the kitchen area to start the coffee. He and Diane used to rent it out occasionally, but lately they've kept it for friends and family. Sarah sat at the small kitchen table, removing her light jacket. She looked different from our soccer field encounter, more polished in a simple sweater and jeans, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her face. I realized I'd rarely seen her outside of school functions or community events, where her role as principal often placed her at the center of activity. How are you really doing, Luke? She asked, her direct gaze making evasion impossible. I considered my answer as I measured coffee into the filter. Better than I expected, worse than I let on. It varies by the hour. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. That sounds about right for someone in your situation. You speak from experience? Some, she acknowledged. My divorce was finalized 3 years ago, before I moved to Fairmont. This was news to me. I'd always assumed she was single by choice, focused on her career. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's not something I talk about much, she said with a small shrug. But it does get better. Not all at once and not in a straight line, but it does get better. The coffee maker gurgled to completion, and I poured 2 mugs, setting one before her along with cream and sugar. That's what everyone keeps telling me. I'm trying to believe it. The fact that you moved here, that you're taking space for yourself, that's a good sign, Sarah said, warming her hands. Around the mug, it took me much longer to stop letting my ex-husband dictate my emotions. We fell into easy conversation then, discovering unexpected common ground. Like me, Sarah had grown up in a small town, though hers had been in Michigan rather than rural Illinois. She'd left for college and a first teaching job in Chicago, marrying a fellow educator who had eventually become more invested in career advancement than their relationship. He kept pushing for more prestigious positions, more connections with the right people, more of everything except what actually mattered, she explained. When he took a job in Boston without even consulting me, I realized I was just an accessory to the life he wanted to project. The parallels to my situation with Brooke were striking, though. In reverse. While Sarah's husband had pulled her toward ambition she didn't share, Brooke had chafed against the rootedness I valued. What brought you to Fairmont? I asked. A fresh start, she said simply, and the principal position opened at exactly the right time. It felt like fate. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the windows as another car pulled up. Kate emerged, carrying what appeared to be several bags of takeout. Reinforcements have arrived, she called out, then stopped short when she saw Sarah through the open door. Oh, you're here already. Sarah looked as confused as I felt. Already? Kate had the grace to look slightly embarrassed as she entered. I may have mentioned to Sarah that I was bringing dinner tonight, and that she should join us. I was going to tell you, Luke, but I wasn't sure you'd agree. Subtle, Kate. Very subtle, I said dryly, though I couldn't muster any real annoyance. The evening had already proven more pleasant than I'd anticipated. If this is awkward, I can go, Sarah offered, starting to rise. Not at all, I said quickly, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Stay, please. There's clearly enough food for a small army. Kate was already unpacking containers of what smelled like Italian food from Angelo's, the best restaurant in Fairmont. I got a bit of everything, and wine, definitely wine. As we settled around the small table with plates of pasta and glasses of red wine, I found myself relaxing completely for the first time in days. The conversation flowed easily, moving from town gossip to childhood, stories to favorite books. Sarah's laugh was genuine and frequent. Kate was in rare form with her storytelling, and I contributed more than my usual share to the conversation. By the time they left, Kate insisting on driving Sarah home after their shared bottle of wine, the guest house felt warmer somehow, less like a retreat and more like a new beginning. I stood in the doorway watching their tail lights disappear down the drive, aware of a lightness in my chest that had nothing to do with the wine, and everything to do with the evening's unexpected connections. My phone buzzed with a text as I was getting ready for bed. I expected Kate's usual good-night check-in, but instead saw Brooke's name on the screen. I went by the house. Where are you? We need to talk. This is important, Luke. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar tug of obligation. In the past, I would have responded immediately, apologizing for being unavailable, arranging a meeting on her terms. Instead, I set the phone down without replying and went to bed. The mediation session was scheduled for the following week, giving me a few more days of peace at Michael's guest house. I settled into a new routine. Mornings spent working remotely, afternoons dedicated to practical matters like speaking with financial advisors and researching my options for the future. Evenings brought various combinations of friends stopping by, often organized by Kate, who seemed determined not to leave me alone with my thoughts for too long. Sarah joined these gatherings several times, always arriving with some small offering, fresh bread, a book she thought I might enjoy, coffee from the specialty shop in the next town over. Her presence was unobtrusive, yet meaningful, adding a dimension to the conversations that I found myself looking forward to. On Friday afternoon, I drove back to the farmhouse to collect more clothes and check on things. The property looked unchanged, peaceful in the golden autumn. Light, but something felt different as I approached the front door, a shift in energy as if the house itself recognized that its future was uncertain. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it, with one exception. A vase of fresh flowers sat on the kitchen table, alongside a note in Brooke's handwriting. We need to talk. I'll be at the house tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please be here. The sight of her handwriting, once so familiar, now sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I stood staring at the note, debating whether to call Lauren for advice, when my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Hey, I answered, still distracted by Brooke's note. What's up? Just checking if you're coming to the bonfire tonight, he said. Diane's making her famous chili, and half the town's showing. Up. I had forgotten about the annual fall bonfire the Jenkinses hosted, a tradition that had started as a small gathering and grown into a community event. I'll be there, I promised, suddenly eager for the normalcy of friends and tradition. Great. Oh, and Luke? Heads up, I heard Brooke's back in town. Yeah, I just found out. She left a note at the house. Michael's sigh was audible through the phone. Want me to come over? We could grab your stuff together. I've got it, I assured him. See you tonight. After gathering what I needed, I locked the house and drove back to the guest house, my mind churning over whether to meet Brooke tomorrow as she requested. Lauren had advised minimal direct contact during the divorce proceedings, but there were practical matters we needed to resolve. And part of me, a part I wasn't entirely proud of, wanted to see her face to face, to look into the eyes of the woman who had betrayed me and feel, what? Vindication, closure, understanding. The bonfire at Michael and Diane's was in full swing by the time I arrived. Their spacious backyard had been transformed with hay bales for seating, strings of lights hanging from trees, and a massive fire. Pit surrounded by people of all ages. The air smelled of wood smoke, chili, and the apple cider warming in large pots over smaller fires. I made my way through the crowd, accepting handshakes, shoulder claps, and the occasional hug from people I'd known most of my life. There was sympathy in their eyes, but also respect. Word of the court victory had spread, elevating me from object of pity to something approaching admiration. "Luke," Diane called, waving from the food table. Her welcoming smile and practical competence had made her Michael's perfect match. "I saved you a bowl of the good batch, extra spicy, just how you like it." "You're a lifesaver," I said gratefully, accepting the steaming bowl and a piece of cornbread. "How's the guest house working out?" she asked, her kind eyes assessing me with maternal concern. "It's perfect. Quiet when I need quiet, but close enough that I don't feel isolated." She patted my arm. "Stay as long as you need. We like having you around." I found a seat on a hay bale near the fire, balancing my bowl on my knees as I ate. The chili was exactly as I remembered from previous years, spicy, hearty, and somehow tasting of friendship itself. Around me, conversations ebbed and flowed. Children darted between adults playing an elaborate game of tag, and someone was tuning a guitar at the edge of the gathering. "Is this seat taken?" Sarah's voice came from beside me. She stood holding her own bowl of chili, gesturing to the empty space on my hay bale. "All yours," I replied, shifting slightly to make room. "I didn't know you were coming." "Tonight? I almost didn't," she admitted, settling beside me. "These kinds of gatherings can be hard when you're still the newcomer after 3 years. I glanced around at the familiar faces that had populated my entire life. I never thought about that. Most of these people have known me since I was born. "It's different when you're an outsider," she said, but her tone was matter-of-fact rather than self-pitying. "Though everyone's been welcoming, especially Kate and the Jenkinses." We ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching as Michael added more logs to the fire, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkening sky. The guitar player had been joined by someone with a fiddle, and they were starting an impromptu performance of folk songs that had several couples getting up to dance. In the cleared area near the fire. "Brooke's back in town," I said suddenly, not sure why I felt compelled to share this with Sarah of all people. She nodded, unsurprised. "I heard. Small towns. She wants to meet tomorrow morning, at the house." Sarah considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Are you going to go?" "I haven't decided yet," I admitted. "Lauren advised against direct contact, but there are things we need to sort out eventually." "What does your gut tell you?" The question was simple but profound. I realized I'd spent so much time considering the legal and practical implications that I hadn't consulted my own instincts. "That I'm not ready," I said finally. "That whatever she wants to discuss, it's on her timeline, not mine." Sarah smiled slightly, approval in her eyes. "Then there's your answer." As the evening progressed, the mood grew more festive. Someone brought out marshmallows for roasting, the musicians played livelier tunes, and Michael persuaded a reluctant Diane to dance, spinning her around in a way that made everyone cheer. "Care to join them?" Sarah asked, nodding toward the makeshift dance floor where several couples were now moving to a waltz-like melody. I hesitated, aware of the symbolic weight of such a simple act. Dancing with another woman, even in this innocent context, felt like a definitive step away from my marriage, more final somehow than legal documents or separate living arrangements. Sarah sensed my hesitation. "Just as friends," she clarified. "I happen to be an excellent dancer, and you look like you could use the practice." Her teasing tone made the decision easier. "I'm terrible," I warned her, "notorious for stepping on toes." "I'll risk it," she said, standing and offering her hand. And so I found myself dancing at the edge of the firelight, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as Sarah gently guided my movements. She was indeed an excellent dancer, making even my clumsy steps seem intentional. As we turned near the fire, I caught sight of Kate watching us, a satisfied smile on her face that made me both embarrassed and grateful for her transparent matchmaking efforts. "Your sister isn't exactly subtle," Sarah murmured, following my gaze. "Subtlety has never been Kate's strong suit," I agreed. "I apologize if she's been putting pressure on you." Sarah shook her head, her hair catching the firelight. "No pressure, she's just being a good sister, trying to help you move forward." "And are you? Helping me move forward?" The question surprised us both. Sarah's steps faltered slightly before she recovered, her eyes meeting mine directly. "I'd like to think we're helping each other," she said quietly. "Friends do that." Before I could respond, the music ended. We separated somewhat, awkwardly, the moment's intimacy giving way to self-consciousness. "I should probably head home," Sarah said, glancing at her watch. "Early meeting tomorrow." "I'll walk you to your car," I offered, aware of Kate's watchful gaze from across the fire. As we moved away from the gathering, the sounds of laughter and music faded slightly, replaced by the crunch of gravel underfoot and the distant hooting of an owl. Sarah's car was parked at the edge of the orchard, moonlight silvering its blue paint. "Thank you for the dance," she said, keys in hand, "and the conversation." "Thank you for the perspective," I replied. "About tomorrow." She studied me for a moment, her expression earnest. "Whatever you decide about meeting Brooke, trust yourself, Luke. You've handled everything else with more grace than most people would manage." The simple vote of confidence touched me deeply. "I'm trying. It shows." She opened her car door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to be okay. More than okay." After she drove away, I returned to the bonfire, but the evening had shifted for me. The laughter seemed louder, the conversations more distant, as I processed the decision. I had come to about tomorrow. Back at the guest house later that night, I composed a text to Brooke. "Can't meet tomorrow. Lauren will contact your attorney to arrange a formal mediation. Please don't enter the house without my permission again." I sent it before I could reconsider, then turned off my phone and went to sleep, feeling lighter than I had in months. The mediation session was held in a neutral conference room at the county courthouse, a sterile space with beige walls and uncomfortable chairs. Lauren sat beside me, her professional demeanor reassuring as we waited for Brooke and her attorney to arrive. The table between us seemed vast, a physical representation of the distance that had grown between my wife and me. When Brooke finally entered, I was struck by how different she looked: thinner, with dark circles under her eyes partially concealed by careful makeup. Her attorney, a sharp-featured man from Springfield named Caldwell, followed closely behind. Gone was the confident swagger she had displayed in court weeks earlier. Instead, she moved with a hesitant energy, her eyes meeting mine briefly before darting away. "Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Caldwell," the mediator, Dr. Eleanor Jensen, greeted them. "Thank you for joining us. Please be seated." The next 3 hours were a meticulous dissection of our shared life: property division, financial assets, even the furniture and wedding gifts we had accumulated over 15 years. Lauren had prepared me well, and I remained calm even when Brooke occasionally attempted to interject emotional appeals or subtle manipulations. "The vacation property in Michigan was a gift from my parents," she claimed at one point, though we both knew her parents had contributed only a small portion of the down payment. "We have documentation showing that the majority of the purchase price came from Mr. Harrison's inheritance following his mother's passing," Lauren countered smoothly, producing the relevant papers. Throughout the process, I watched Brooke with a strange detachment, as if observing a character in a film rather than the woman who had once been the center of my world. Her voice, her gestures, even her perfume, all were familiar yet somehow diminished, as if she had become less substantial in my absence. During a short break, I stepped outside for fresh air. The courthouse square was busy with midday activity, people hurrying to lunch, a school group touring the historic building, life continuing in all its mundane glory. I leaned against a stone pillar, drawing deep breaths of the crisp October air. "Luke." I turned to find Brooke standing a few feet away, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. Without her attorney beside her, she seemed smaller, less certain. "I've been trying to talk to you," she said, a note of accusation in her voice. "Through lawyers is better," I replied, maintaining distance both physical and emotional. "Is that what you really want? After 15 years, we can't even have a conversation." I studied her, noticing how she shifted under my gaze, unused to this new dynamic between us. In the past, I would have been the one seeking reconciliation, offering compromise, smoothing over conflict. "What happened to Travis?" I asked instead of answering her question. The change of subject caught her off guard. "He went back to Chicago. It didn't work out." "I'm not surprised. It wasn't like you think," she said quickly. "He had ideas, opportunities. He could see the potential in the land that you never could." "The potential for profit," I clarified, "at the expense of everything else." Brooke sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "You never understood ambition, Luke. You were always content to just exist in Fairmont, never wanting more." "I wanted more," I corrected her gently. "Just not the same more as you. I wanted deeper, not bigger." She looked genuinely puzzled, as if I were speaking a language she couldn't quite translate. This, I realized, had always been our fundamental disconnect. We valued entirely different currencies of life. "We should get back inside," I said, straightening from the pillar. "They'll be waiting." "Wait," she said, reaching toward me but stopping short of actual contact. "I need to know, is there someone else? People are talking about you and Sarah Mitchell." The question surprised me, as did the vulnerability behind it. "No," I answered truthfully. "There's no one else. But you've been seen with her. At the bonfire. At Angelo's. We're friends," I said simply. "Something you and I never really were, when I think about it." The observation wasn't meant to wound, but Brooke flinched as if I'd struck her. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," I conceded. "But it's true, isn't it? We were lovers, partners in some ways, but never really friends." She had no answer for that. We stood in silence for a moment, the courthouse clock ticking steadily above us, marking the final moments of our marriage with impartial precision. "We should go back in," I said finally. The remainder of the mediation proceeded efficiently. By late afternoon, we had reached agreements on most major issues. The farmhouse would be sold, with proceeds divided equally. I would retain full ownership of the family land, while Brooke would keep her retirement accounts and the vacation property she valued. Smaller items were allocated with surprising ease, both of us suddenly eager to complete the process. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Jensen congratulated us on our progress. "This is one of the more amicable settlements I've facilitated," she observed. "You've both shown remarkable maturity." Outside, as Lauren packed documents into her briefcase, Brooke approached me one last time. Her attorney waited by a sleek rental car, pointedly giving us space. "So this is it," she said, her voice carrying a finality that seemed to surprise even her. "The papers will be finalized in a few weeks," I confirmed. "Lauren will handle the details." Brooke nodded, then hesitated as if gathering courage. "For what it's worth, I am sorry, Luke. Not for wanting more, but for how I went about it. You deserved better." The apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, caught me off guard. For a moment I glimpsed the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago, direct, unguarded, capable of surprising depth. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was something. "Thank you," I said simply. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Brooke. I really do." She smiled then, a sad smile tinged with recognition. "You already have, haven't you? Not someone else maybe, but something, peace maybe." "Getting there," I admitted. We didn't embrace or shake hands. Instead, she turned and walked to the waiting car, her heels clicking against the pavement with familiar determination. I watched until the car disappeared around the corner, carrying away 15 years of shared history and misaligned dreams. Lauren appeared beside me, her expression concerned. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Actually, I am." That evening, I returned to Michael's guest house, to find Kate waiting on the small porch, 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey beside her. "How'd it go?" she asked as I approached. "Better than expected," I told her, settling into the chair beside hers. "It's almost done." She poured generous measures of whiskey into both glasses, handing one to me. "2 endings," she proposed, raising her glass. "And beginnings," I added, touching my glass to hers. We sat in comfortable silence as twilight descended, casting long shadows across the orchard. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, answered moments later by its mate. "I'm proud of you," Kate said finally, "for standing your ground, for not letting them take what matters." I sipped my whiskey, feeling its warmth spread through me. "You know what I realized today? Watching Brooke in that conference room, seeing how small her schemes seem now." "What?" "That I'm grateful," I said, the truth of it becoming clear as I spoke. "Not for the betrayal or the pain, but for the wake-up call. I was sleepwalking, Kate, going through the motions of a life that wasn't really mine anymore." She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "And now?" "Now I'm awake," I said simply, terrifyingly, exhilaratingly awake. Later that night, after Kate had gone, I sat alone on the porch, looking up at stars that seemed impossibly bright. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "How did everything go today?" I found myself smiling as I typed back, "1 chapter closing, ready for the next one." Her response came quickly. "Those are often the best ones." Winter yielded to spring, and spring bloomed into summer. The divorce was finalized with little fanfare, just signatures on documents and a check from the sale of the farmhouse. With Lauren's help, I found a small cottage at the edge of town, close enough to my family's land for daily visits, but removed from the memories that had permeated the farmhouse. The cottage needed work, peeling paint, outdated plumbing, a garden, reclaimed by weeds. But there was something satisfying about the restoration process. Each repair felt symbolic, a tangible representation of rebuilding my life piece by piece. Michael helped with the major projects, while Kate appointed herself interior decorator, filling the rooms with comfortable furniture and practical touches that made the space feel like home. Sarah stopped by regularly, initially with practical housewarming gifts, kitchen utensils, plant cuttings for the garden, books for the empty shelves, but increasingly just to spend time together. Our friendship deepened gradually, naturally, built on shared conversations and quiet understanding rather than the intense passion that had characterized my beginning with Brooke. By July, the cottage transformation was nearly complete. On a warm Saturday evening, I hosted a small gathering to celebrate. Just Kate, Michael and Diane, a few close friends, and Sarah, who arrived last with a homemade pie and a bottle of wine. "This place is unrecognizable," she marveled, taking in the fresh paint, new fixtures and thriving garden visible through the open windows. "You've created something special here, Luke." "Had plenty of help," I reminded her, accepting the pie with appreciation. "I couldn't have done it alone." "Could have," she corrected gently. "Chose not to." "There's a difference." The evening unfolded with easy laughter and comfortable conversation, everyone spilling from the living room to the back porch as the sun began to set. Michael manned the grill while Diane organized the food table with practiced efficiency. Kate flitted between groups, making sure wine glasses stayed filled and conversations remained lively. I found myself beside Sarah on the porch steps, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance over the newly planted flower beds. "Principal Mitchell," Kate called from inside. "Phone call for you. Something about the school budget meeting." Sarah sighed apologetically. "Duty calls, even in summer." As she went inside to take the call, Michael claimed her spot, handing me a cold beer. "Quite a transformation," he observed, gesturing to the cottage and yard. "Not just the house." "What do you mean?" He took a thoughtful sip of his beer. "6 months ago you were a shell, brother, walking wounded. Now look at you, hosting parties, planning for the future, even smiling again." "It was time," I said simply. Michael nodded towards Sarah, visible through the window as she spoke on the phone, her free hand gesturing animatedly. "She's good for you, you know. Different from Brooke in all the right ways." I felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the summer evening. "We're just friends." "For now," Michael said with a knowing grin. "But I've known you since we were stealing apples from Old Man Weber's orchard." I recognized that look. Before I could respond, Kate appeared on the porch, a conspiratorial gleam in her eye. "Everyone out to the garden. I have a surprise." We followed her instructions, gathering in the newly landscaped backyard, where strings of lights had been hung from tree branches, creating a canopy of soft illumination. Sarah rejoined us, apologizing for the interruption. "What's this about, Kate?" I asked, suspicious of my sister's theatrical announcement. She grinned, producing a small box from her pocket. "A housewarming gift, from all of us." Inside the box was an antique key on a simple leather cord. I turned it over in my palm, confused. "I already have keys to the cottage." "Not for the cottage," Kate explained. "It's symbolic, a key to the next chapter. We all contributed to a fund for you to use however you want. Travel, education, that workshop space you've been talking about building. Something just for you." I looked around at the circle of faces, Kate's expectant smile, Michael and Diane's quiet satisfaction, and Sarah's warm gaze, and felt a swell of emotion that nearly overwhelmed me. These people had carried me through the darkest period of my life, not by solving my problems or fighting my battles, but by standing beside me as I found my own way forward. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, voice rough with feeling. "You don't have to say anything," Diane assured me. "Just promise you'll use it for something that makes you happy." Later, as the gathering wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself alone with Sarah in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side in comfortable silence. "Thank you," I said finally, "for everything these past months." She smiled, handing me a plate to dry. "That's what friends do." "Is that what we are, just friends?" The question surprised me as much as her, emerging from some brave, newly awakened part of myself. Sarah set down the glass. She was washing, turning to face me fully. I think we both know we're moving towards something more, she said carefully. The question is whether you're ready for that. I considered her words, appreciating her directness. 6 months ago, I wasn't. Even 3 months ago, I was still sorting through too much debris. And now? Now I'm ready to find out what's possible, I said honestly. Not rushing, not looking for replacements or distractions, just open to possibilities I couldn't see before. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I like the sound of that. Would you have dinner with me next Friday? Not as friends dropping by, but as an actual date. Her smile was answer enough, but she added, I'd like that very much. After everyone had gone and the cottage stood quiet under the summer moon, I walked out to the edge of my property, where a clear view of the family land stretched before me in silvered darkness. The fields my ancestors had tended, that Brooke and Travis had coveted, that I had fought to protect, they remained constant and enduring, a legacy not just of ownership but of values passed through generations. In the courthouse months ago, Judge Morales had looked at Brooke and declared, Ma'am, you are trespassing. At the time, it had felt like vindication, a public acknowledgement of the private betrayal I had endured. But standing here now, I recognized a deeper truth. The real victory hadn't been in that moment of courtroom drama, but in every quiet decision I had made since, to heal rather than harden, to build rather than blame, to remain open, to joy despite the risk of pain. My father's words returned to me clearer than ever. The strength of a man is measured not by what he keeps, but by what he protects. I had protected the land, yes, but more importantly, I had protected my capacity for trust, for connection, for growth. That was the true inheritance, not acres or assets, but the resilience to begin again. The cottage lights behind me cast my shadow long across the grass, a single figure standing tall and unbowed, not because I had never fallen, but because I had risen again, stronger at the broken places. In my pocket, I felt the weight of the key Kate had given me, not just a gift, but a promise that whatever door I chose to unlock next, I wouldn't be walking through it alone. The night air carried the scent of fresh cut grass and distant rain, the promise of growth and renewal. I breathed it in deeply, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over me. Whatever came next, with Sarah, with the land, with the life I was rebuilding, I was ready to face it with clear eyes and an open heart. The silent victory had never been about winning against Brooke and Travis. It had been about reclaiming myself, my dignity, my future, my capacity for joy. Standing there under the vast summer sky, I finally understood that some battles are won not with dramatic confrontations or public vindication, but with the quiet, persistent courage to keep moving forward, one step at a time, toward the light.